life is unfair. Sometimes people have it easier than you do. Sometimes they don't have to go through the challenges that you have to go through. And what this can often do is put us into a victimhood mentality where it's the world is acting against us, or we are just byproducts of the events that happen in our lives, and we lose agency because of that. So this is essentially my experience of trying to get out of the victimhood mentality that I had for a really long time when I was growing up. So without further ado, let's dive into it. My brother was killed when I was 10. He was shot in the head by one of his friends, and as a result of that, my mom started drinking really heavily, and she died of liver failure when she was just 45. I was 16 at the time. And these are really heavy losses to go through really early in life. And I mean, especially because I was 16, I wasn't very emotionally suited to handle those things. And I mean, it just led to a lot of, I can't say poor behaviors. Like I know other people in similar circumstances could have had a much worse time than I did, but it put me in the wrong mindset to try to get my way through this. You know, there's several instances, you know, I believe that the world owed me an easier path because I'd already gone through so much. And like I know my case was special. There's no one else around me that had kind of been through those losses, and like, I mean, even just that idea of feeling special because of it, it was something I felt, and it was something that I leaned on and I almost took advantage of, even though it's not something that I was proud of. Like, I didn't accomplish anything, but people gave me a lot of attention, so I would do attention-seeking behaviors. I'm not proud of how I did that. Again, like, I don't think I was a terrible, horrible person, but it's just, it's embarrassing looking back and just seeing the way that I acted as a result of, you know, pretty much a family tragedy. And I also carried a lot of resentment, like because people didn't have the experience that I did. You know, there's always that, like, you don't know what's really tough or challenging, but I do, because I've been through that, and I've lost people that I love and that I care about, and like, look at you with your happy families, and you know, oh, you think your argument with your brother's bad, just imagine your brother. Really petty, stupid stuff. Again, 16, immature, emotional intelligence, but you get where I'm going with this. And this kind of like facilitated this victim's mindset. Like, oh, woe is me, these terrible things happen. Again, terrible things, yes, but there's no way that I was going to do anything productive with that kind of mentality, and it's not something that I could see at that point in my life. A little bit after my mom died, I started to feel a lot of guilt about our relationship. You know, like we had an interesting relationship for sure. You know, it was largely affectionate, but when she drank, that was a trigger for me. And I didn't respect her at all when she was drunk. And this was pretty frequent. And this led to us having a lot of different heated arguments. And I mean, in these arguments, we would say nasty things to each other. We would yell at each other. We didn't handle each other's insecurities or issues very well at all during that. And, you know, part of me was like, hey, like, you're supposed to be taking care of me because you're my mom, and you're not. You're not showing up in the way that I think you should. And my victimhood mentality really leaned into that. So following a lot of that, like, I didn't like the guilt of our relationship, and I didn't like the fact that that's how we ended everything. You know, this was at the point where it was too late to take anything back. She'd already died. I didn't like that there was no reconciliation between us. There was no chance for me to say goodbye. She died. My family didn't really tell me that she was on her way out. They wanted me to just pay attention in school, so there was that to deal with as well. But kind of going over this idea of guilt and how our arguments played out, you know, like sometimes she'd get drunk and we would be goofy together, but most of the time, if she was drunk, I would just get irritated and I didn't want to deal with her, and I would push her away and tell her to just, you know, stay away from me, like, shut up, you're drunk. You know, I wasn't a sympathetic host, especially if she would get drunk and start to get really emotional. You know, I wasn't really equipped to handle her problems too. And, you know, we'd dig into each other and things would escalate. And several times there was a point where, you she'd be like, I drink because I'm sad. And like, I wasn't sympathetic at all. Like, I dealt with a loss too. This isn't me justifying it. I'm just saying what I thought at the time. But in my head, I'm like, I dealt with a loss too. And it's been several years since then. You need to get over it. Everyone else has moved on, and you're the only one acting like an idiot about this. And just sometimes in those escalations, she would just start crying and say, my son is dead. And I kept going over that phrase, over and over and over and over. And eventually, through like that feeling of guilt, I came through the first breakthrough of like my victimhood mentality. Because in replaying that, like, my son is dead, my son is dead, at some point, it must have happened subconsciously because I never thought about it at the time. But there's this feeling of like, yeah, your son is dead, but I'm not. I'm here and I need you. And while your son is dead, am I not good enough to live for? And coming across that question, am I not good enough to live for? I never got to ask her that question. This happened years after she died, and it was one of those ones where it's like, God, what a missed opportunity. Like, there's several things I wish I had done differently. I wish I could have reconciled our relationship. I wish I could have said I love you before she died. But I also wish I was able to ask her that question, and it just kind of eats at me. But this breakthrough is like, you know what? I've been feeling, very emotional things, very guilty things. But when I asked myself this question, was I not good enough to live for? It kind of gave me some vindication, like my resentment. There's a good, real reason for my resentment. Like, I felt like my mom abandoned me. I felt like she was supposed to be there when I needed her, and she wasn't. And in asking myself this question, I got to almost absolve myself of a lot of the guilt. Now, again, I think this is like an immature stage of my victimhood journey, but it put cause behind why I felt the way that I felt. And it made me understand myself a lot better, which is a very important step. But if you're listening to this, you're like, well, dude, she lost her son. Like, you don't solve this problem by putting more blame. Like, you sucked too. And you know what? You're right. We have to get to that point. But right now, this breakthrough, it doesn't fix the victimhood mentality. It's helpful, it's a start, and I really needed to get to this point, but it's still very much, woe is me, I'm a broken child, and I'm a victim of a great injustice. I felt abandoned by everyone. My brother was gone, my mom was gone, my dad at that point was gone, and I just felt like people kept leaving me, and it hurt, and it made me feel very insecure. And I think that was a big part of the attention-seeking behavior that I used to have. Is like, I felt insecure. I had low self-esteem because I feel like my mom chose my brother over me. Well, I'm going to consider this a breakthrough. It is not the end. It is not where I needed to end up. But it was a breakthrough, and it kind of got me through several years because it allowed me to make peace with what I was feeling at the time. Now, we have to fast forward, several years. My mom died when I was in high school. And then in college, who would have thought I ended up as a psychology major after dealing with years of trauma and personal reflection and all of that. But I was a psychology major, and in the psych department, we were in a class for psychotherapies, current psychotherapies, and my psychology professor introduced me to the work of Dr. Irvin D. Yalom. And he wrote a large set of works, but his focus was on existential psychotherapy. And I had a high school teacher, Justine Sadoff, who really got me interested in existentialism when I was in high school. And so if we can just combine existentialism and psychology, that is a dream come true for me. So not only did I start learning about this therapy, I also dove into all of the works from Irvin Yalom. And I loved so much of what he wrote, but there was one thing that ended up just breaking my heart. It got me to a huge breakthrough with how I thought about my situation and how I kind of understood myself in the context of everything that happened to me. In this book, Mama and the Meaning of Life, in the story, the writer, Dr. Yalom, writes about how he's dreaming. And he sees himself on a hospital bed and he's dying. And while he's on his deathbed, he closes his eyes and drifts off to sleep. And he ends up at an amusement park that he used to visit when he was a child. And before the ride takes off, he looks out into the crowd that's there at the amusement park. And he sees his mom watching him. And he waves at her. And he says, "Mama, how'd I do? How'd I do, Mama? And then the author woke up. And this dream confused him because his mom was already dead. And at this point, he's a successful author and a clinician. And to be frank, he had less than kind words to say about his mom. And they didn't have a very good relationship. Realistically, he never really cared about her validation. He was really embarrassed of her, and that was probably the last thing on his mind. But despite this, in his dream, on his deathbed, he's calling out to her. Why? To answer this question, he falls back asleep and tries to re-enter the dream. And he gets off the ride and goes out to his mom, once again asking, how'd I do, Mama? And she talks about how she's proud of him, yada yada. But this question ends up leading into a conversation where his mom gets to respond to all of the criticisms that he had of her while they were growing up. It makes him realize that he only viewed their relationship from his side, and naturally with him as the victim of their relationship. And in a massive twist with this story, the dream that was happening was never his dream at all. It was hers. It wasn't him dying in the deathbed, it was her. Her drifting off to sleep, dreaming that she gets to watch her son and have him wave at her, and before she dies asks, how did I do, Mama? And one of the last lines in the story is that wasn't your dream, that was mine. Mothers get to have dreams too. And I think that line just broke me, because this story very much parallels my life and my relationship with my mom and how everything seemed to go. I was a son that felt like a victim of the relationship, while I contributed nothing positively to it either. I had dreams of growing up with a happy family with my brother and my mom. I had dreams of being just like everybody else that I grew up with, normal families. And what I never considered was that my mom had dreams too. She never dreamed about burying her son. She dreamed of taking my brother to baseball practice, of hearing him play the trumpet, of watching her two sons grow up. And she never got to have that dream. And what this did was it reopened the guilt that I felt about our relationship, but I think in a positive way. Because the question that I asked myself to get through one period of my grief or of my trauma was, was I not good enough to live for? It's a question that was asked to someone that was going through their own things at their own time. Now, a lot of people would make the argument that she should have been there for me, but I understand why she wasn't. I understand that this experience is beyond me. This wasn't about me. It was about my mom too, and it was about my brother. And once I realized that it's beyond just me, I really think that it's all beyond all of us. The meaning of it, what it means to us, it's not real. And at the end of the day, I don't need an answer to the question, am I not good enough to live for? Because really, it's not about her either. If I want to move on from this, all of the answers are going to end up leading to the same door. If I wasn't good enough to live for, if she really did pick my brother over me, there's a lot that I'm going to have to process with that, but at the end of the day, so what? Where do we go from here? Regardless of what the answer is, where do we go from here? To really find peace in this situation, to be able to move on, I had to realize that I don't need the answer to that question. It was never about the answer. I have to move on regardless of what that answer is. And so I think the last bit of work that I had to do with my whole mentality is reconcile the guilt that I did have for how I showed up in our relationship, make peace with it, and then from there, the only thing left to do is to move on, to not identify with this situation. And so this takes us down to our action steps. I want to do more than just give my experience to you. If you stuck around for this long and you're struggling with something that's really holding you back, if you're struggling with some circumstance or some situation that is making you feel like a victim, I want you to think about using this story as a parable of the different ways that we work through the traumas that we have. It took me a long time. It was clunky and it was messy. It was far from a perfect execution. But eventually I stopped identifying so much with this problem. And so a few action steps that I want to give you to move forward with confidence, with poise, with strength. Number one, make peace that some of the questions that you would love to have answered are never going to get answered, and they don't need to get answered. The answer that you need is it's time to move forward. Stop looking for permission, for things to fall into place in order for you to move on. You don't need justice to heal. You don't need closure to move forward. The unfortunate reality that we all have to face is that life doesn't care about our problems. Life doesn't care about our situation. It is going to continue whether we're ready for it or not. And the best thing that we can do is to stop waiting around for answers that we don't need or permissions that we don't need to make powerful progress moving forward. Next, don't think that things happen to you or that life is acting against you. Things happen, you're involved, but they don't happen to you. You are not your trauma. Your trauma, whatever it is in the past. It's stuck there, but you can move forward. Don't take your stuff with you. Next, you're not a victim. A victim is an identity that you choose to give yourself and carry with you. Nobody can tell you that you are a victim, or if they do, you can choose whether or not you accept that. Don't carry that title with you. Let it not be about you. And then start writing the next chapter of your story. Well, that's it. Comment below if there's something that you are ready to let go of. In the next year or so, we're going to be going over other personal experiences very similar to this. So if this video struck a chord with you, subscribe and stay up to date as everything rolls out. I hope this message will help somebody heal from the hard stuff. I know you can do it. I had to do it from the bottom of my heart. I believe in you.